Hi, welcome back to McClutchy Maths. My name is Natalie McClutchy, and today I'm going to be taking you through our 8th video in our Consumer Arithmetic series on exchange rates. And this is for our senior maths students right across Australia, as well as business students and adults who are also interested in learning about the concept. In this video, you'll find out what an exchange rate is. We'll do a couple of quick worked examples and then find out what's coming next in our series. So let's get straight into it and find out what an exchange rate is. It is the value of one currency in proportion to one another currency. So in Australia, we use Australian dollars. Overseas, there are in fact 180 different currencies around the world, and the British pound is the oldest one, dating back 1300 years. So in every country around the world, they all have their own form of currency. And in order to be able to go to that country and spend some money, you need to be able to use that currency. So that means you have to change out of Australian dollars into another currency to be able to go shopping in that country. So typically exchange rates are used when you travel overseas, but they can also be used, for example, when you're buying products online from another country, such as when you're going on eBay, like I do quite a lot, and also when you are doing things like foreign currency exchange on the stock market. So that's for more of our adults who are doing currency exchange as a form of investment. Now, over time and throughout the day, the Australian dollar changes in value in comparison to other currencies. So sometimes the Australian dollar can buy you a lot of value when you travel overseas because of where the Australian dollar is placed. Other times, when the economy is in a different position, you may not get as much bang for your buck, as they say. So, for example, there was a time when I went overseas and I had 100 Australian dollars and I was only able to get 50 US dollars with that money, which meant that I was able to buy maybe 1 or 2 pairs of shoes. However, other times I've gone overseas and I've been able to get 80 US dollars for the same amount of Australian dollars, which has meant that my holiday value has been a lot greater. Have a look at this quick graph. I'm not going to be sitting here for long, but this just shows you the Australian dollar compared to the US dollar. And the reason why I've chosen the US dollar is because it's one of the world's major currencies that people compare their dollar to. You can see that over time, the Australian dollar has fluctuated quite a lot. So it really depends on when you're buying your currency, what time of day, and what's happening in the general economy as to what kind of value you get when you're changing your money. So let's talk about how we calculate exchange rates. Well, it uses the same principles that you would have learned in grade 8 and 9, looking at how to calculate ratios. So that's what we're actually doing. When we change, we look at what the value of $1 is, one Australian dollar compared to a number of other currencies, but then we're changing a larger amount of money because no one's going to go overseas with one Australian dollar. They're going to take a bit more than that to spend. So we want to work out what that $1, if that $1 is worth a certain amount of a foreign currency, we're going to expand that out to the amount of money we actually want to travel with. Let me take you through an example and it'll become so much clearer. So for all our examples today, we're going to use this little chart here. This was current as of yesterday, which was the 10th of March 2021, but obviously this is going to be different today and different tomorrow and all the way into the future. So in our first example, we are going to convert 500 Australian dollars into euros. So that might be a case that I need to send 500 Australian dollars to a family member over in the UK or in Europe, and I need to change it into their money, or maybe I'm going on holidays, I wish. Okay, so first of all, I need to find in the chart my euro conversion. That's it right there that I've circled. You'll notice that there's a funny little symbol in front of the money for the euros. It's an E, a funny looking E that's curved. In Europe, they use euros. In Australia, we use dollars. So we use the dollar sign. When you're in Japan, they use yen. They've got a different symbol for that. There's different symbols for pounds in England. So just be familiar that there are different symbols used for currency. Okay, so the first thing is we've located on the table what the euros are. So the first thing I need to write down is my conversion. 1 Australian dollar equals 0.645 euros. So basically, if we think about this logically, if I have $500 and that's the conversion rate, I'm going to end up with less than $500 when I make my conversion to euros. So let's think about this as though we were looking at ratios. To get to 500 Australian dollars, I'd have to multiply $1 by 500. That's pretty straightforward. So if this is like a ratio, I'm going to do the same to the other side of the ratio. I'm going to multiply the number of euros, 0.645 by 500 as well, to get to the amount of euros that I would receive from the exchange rate place. I'd get 322.5 euros. Now there is an alternative way to set this out. I've just shown you sort of the kind of working that you would do if you're in grade 8 or 9 doing ratio conversions. However, the alternative working is the kind of working you'd be expected to set yours out with when you get into senior mathematics. So once again, that first line is the same. We write down what the conversion is. We've identified that we've found that conversion off the table. And we've also recognized that we need to multiply the 0.645 by 500, and that gets us to 322.5 euros. Let's look at our second worked example. We're going to convert 25 Australian dollars to Indonesian rupiah. So as we did in our previous example, we're going to firstly locate that on the table, and you'll notice that this time, instead of the conversion being smaller, we've actually got a number that's really big. There's a lot of rupiah for 1 Australian dollar. But the process is still the same. So firstly, we're going to write down our conversion, and to get from 1 Australian dollar to 25 Australian dollars, we're going to multiply by 25. To get from 11,000 to the destination rupiah, well, it's the exact same process. We're going to multiply that by 25 as well. And we're going to end up with 275,619.25 rupiah. Now think about the logic in that. We had to multiply from $1 to 25, so we got a bigger answer. So we're expecting our answer for rupiahs to be bigger than 11,000. Always think about what are you expecting to see. Once again, our alternative working here is to simply write our exchange rate and then jump straight to the multiply by 25 and give your final answer with the currency that's required. We are now on to our third worked example. In this case, we're actually going backwards. We've got 1,000 Japanese yen and we're changing back into Australian dollars. So we've been on a holiday and now we need to get our leftover money changed back into Australian dollars cash. So firstly, let's locate the Japanese yen on our table, and it's right here, and have a little think about the conversion. We've got 1 Australian dollar equals 83 approximately Japanese yen. So once again, there's a lot more yen to Australian dollars. Now, because we're going backwards, we're going to do a little bit of a circle here. So we start off with our exchange rate. We've got 1 Australian dollars, 83 Japanese yen. But we've got 1,000 Japanese yen, and we need to go backwards to the Australian dollars. So you're going to ask yourself, how many times does 83 go into 1,000? And so we can divide that in, and we'll find that the answer is 11.98. So we now need to multiply the $1 by 11.98 to get to how many dollars we end up with? $11.98. So if you look at that process, firstly you ask yourself, how many times does that currency go into the amount that we have, and then that gives us our that division gives us our multiplication factor to go back in the other direction. So it's kind of like we do a big circle. You could also set that out in this particular way, dividing that by the 83, and that gives us $11. Now you might ask yourself, well, what if I forget and I do the wrong thing? Well, in that particular situation, if you were to multiply the 1,000 instead of dividing the 1,000 by 83, you'd end up with 83,000 Australian dollars. So if you think about the logic of it, you've got to have less Australian dollars than you've got Japanese yen. So multiplying is not going to get you there. Dividing is. Let's look at another worked example. Now this one's a little bit more complicated. Tess traveled from USA to Australia with US $5,000. So she's come from America, come to Australia. She's had a nice little holiday here. She changed her money to Aussie dollars, spent 2,800, and then she headed back to the North American continent via Canada, and she wants to change her money that she's got left from Australia back into Canadian dollars, and we need to work out how much Canadian dollars she has. So firstly, let's start with that little leg of the voyage from USA to Australia. So 1 Australian dollars equals 0.764 US dollars. So she's starting with 5,000. So we're going back into Australian dollars. You'll notice that there's less US dollars than there are Australian. So that means that when we do the change, she's going to end up with more Australian dollars than 5,000. So think the logic through. Okay, so firstly, we're going to write that exchange here. Now, in this particular case, I'm not going to do the little ratio thing from grade 8, 9 sort of working. We're just going to go straight to senior working here. So from US dollars to Australian dollars, she's going to divide that 5,000 by 0.764, and she ends up with $6,544.50 Australian cents. Now, I'm just going to stop for a second here. When you divide by a number less than 0, you end up with a bigger number. And that's what we're expecting to see here. We're expecting to see more Australian dollars than US dollars. So that's part of the logic that can go behind that. If you weren't sure what to do and you multiplied that 5,000 by 0.764, you're going to end up with a smaller number than 5,000. And that's not what you want. So think that logic through. If you're not sure whether to divide or multiply, think about what you should end up with, and that will help you guide you to what operator to use. Okay, so now we know how many Australian dollars she's got. Now let's work out what she spent. Now, at this particular point, if you're doing this along with me on the calculator, you'll notice that the answer wasn't on your calculator exactly 50 cents. There was a whole lot of other decimal places. But when you're actually changing money to come into Australia, they're not going to give you fractions of a cent. They're actually going to round it at the cashier there and give you exactly that rounded number. Now, normally when we do a series of calculations, we leave on the calculator the unrounded number and we use that unrounded number all the way through. This is one of those situations where we don't, because it's a real life situation that we're modeling. She's actually physically changing that money, spending the money, and then physically changing it on another day. So now we need to take those holiday expenses away. 2,800 gets taken off that, and we're left with $3,744.20. Now Tess is heading off to Canada. So we are now going to do our change here from Australian dollars to Canadian dollars, and we've circled that in our table, different exchange rate now. Let's have a quick look at it. 1 Australian dollar is equal to less than a Canadian dollar. It's 0.967, so less than $1. So when we're looking at this $3,700 that she's changing, when we change it to Canadian dollars, there will be less. So let's have a look at that. If we're going to multiply that by 0.967, yes, 3,700 is bigger than $3,620.64. So we've got a logical final answer there. So we're also going to round this one off to 2 decimal places, because when she changes that, they're going to give it to her exactly 64 cents. Now, quite possibly in Canada, they don't have 1 cent pieces anymore, in which case you might even logically round that to 60 cents. However, in this case, we're leaving it at 64 cents. Well, that's all our worked examples for today. Coming up next, we're going to talk about dividends, GST, and then we're on to our next series. And if you've got a suggestion of what you'd like to see, let us know at mcclutchymass@yahoo.com. As usual, I'd like to welcome some of our new subscribers this week. Thank you very much for joining us here on the channel, and why not follow us on Facebook at McClutchy Maths. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining me. I'm Natalie McClutchy. See you later.